Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories, a Sunday prayer for my family. Heavenly Father, on this sacred Sunday we gather in your presence with hearts both heavy and hopeful. Lord, we bring before you the pain that words can inflict, how casual cruelty can wound even the strongest spirit. We ask for your divine comfort for those among us feeling rejected, misunderstood, or falsely represented in this world. Grant us the strength to persevere when others question our worth or integrity. Father, we pray for discernment in this age of confusion when authenticity is challenged and imitation abounds. Help your children recognize truth amidst deception. For those who feel compelled to leave our community, we ask your blessing upon their journey. For those who remain faithful, we thank you for their steadfast hearts. Lord, transform our hurt into healing, our disappointment into determination, and our tears into testimony of your unfailing grace. In your most holy name we pray. Amen. And I am too much sad today. Few comments hurt me too much. One said, "I don't have enough time to listen to your long videos. You are shit, and I am going to unsubscribe." Another said my stories do not have the thrill and quality like before. Because everyone created channels with my name, people are thinking I am writing stories which are low-quality content. I want to make this clear. I have been writing for the last 30 years, and if someone is creating fake channels with my name and producing low-quality content, it doesn't mean he is Mr. Peter. Sorry again if I lecture you every day. Some family members will stay with me and others will leave. I pray for everyone. Let's start with love. The grand cathedral of St. Michael's stood magnificent against Charleston's azure sky, its stained glass windows casting kaleidoscope patterns across rows of expectant guests. Outside, Jade Collins drew a steadying breath, her fingers trembling around the manila envelope clutched to her chest. The contents inside had cost her nearly everything: her job at the Hamilton estate, her reputation, and possibly her future in this tightly knit coastal community. "Last chance to walk away," she whispered to herself, brushing a wayward strand of chestnut hair from her face. The cathedral bells chimed 3 times, signaling the ceremony's progression. Inside, Dr. Elijah Blackwood stood at the altar, his tall frame accentuated by an impeccably tailored tuxedo. His jawline remained tense, despite his practiced smile. From her position at the back of the cathedral, Jade could see the shadow of uncertainty in his eyes. The same doubt she'd witnessed during the 6 months she'd worked as event coordinator at his fiancée's family estate. Victoria Hamilton floated down the aisle in a cloud of French lace and family prestige, her porcelain features arranged in perfect bridal serenity. Only Jade knew the truth, hidden beneath that practiced smile. Only Jade had discovered the whispered phone calls, the secret meetings, and finally the damning photographs that confirmed Victoria's ongoing affair with Elijah's cousin, along with their scheme to access the Blackwood family's historic coastal estate. "Dearly beloved," the minister's voice resonated through the vaulted ceiling, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Elijah James Blackwood and Victoria Catherine Hamilton in holy matrimony." Jade's heartbeat accelerated, blood rushing in her ears as the minister continued through the ceremony. She thought of her sister Emma, beautiful, trusting Emma, who had withered away after discovering her husband's betrayal too late. The memory of Emma's hollow eyes gave Jade the courage she needed when the minister finally spoke the words she'd been waiting for. "If anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." The traditional pause stretched into uncomfortable silence. Jade stepped forward from the shadows, her simple emerald dress a stark contrast to the pastel-clad wedding guests. 200 members of Charleston's elite society turned to stare as her heels echoed against marble floors. "I object," Jade said, her voice carrying despite her dry throat. Victoria's face transformed from shock to fury in an instant. Elijah remained perfectly still, his dark eyes locking with Jade's across the expanse between them. "This is outrageous," Victoria's father bellowed, rising from his front row seat. "Forgive the interruption," Jade continued, walking steadily down the aisle, dignity in every step despite the murmurs rippling through the congregation. "But Dr. Blackwood deserves to know the truth before making this mistake." She reached the altar, standing mere feet from the couple. Victoria's rage was palpable, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her bouquet of white roses. "You have exactly 5 seconds to leave before I have security remove you," Victoria hissed. Jade ignored her, focusing instead on Elijah, whose composed expression revealed nothing of his thoughts. "3 months ago, I discovered something while organizing events at the Hamilton estate," she said directly to him. "I tried to convince Victoria to tell you herself. She refused." "This is absurd," Victoria interjected. "Elijah, this woman is clearly unstable." "Let her speak," Elijah said quietly, his first words carrying unexpected authority. Jade handed him the envelope. "Inside are photographs of Victoria with your cousin Andrew, taken at Folly Beach last month. There are also bank statements showing funds being transferred from the account established for your future home together to an offshore account in Andrew's name." She swallowed hard. "And messages detailing their plan to contest your grandmother's will regarding Blackwood Haven after the wedding." The cathedral erupted in shocked whispers as Elijah opened the envelope. His expression remained controlled as he examined each document, though a muscle twitched along his jawline. Victoria's parents rose from their seats, her father's face flushed with anger. "You scheming little nobody," Victoria spat, dropping her facade completely. "You were nothing but the help. How dare you?" "Is it true?" Elijah interrupted, his voice deadly quiet as he held up a particularly damning photograph. Victoria's silence was confirmation enough. "Andrew is waiting for you now, isn't he?" Elijah asked, realization dawning in his eyes. "Not for the wedding. He was never planning to attend. He's waiting for after, when the Blackwood Trust would be accessible to you as my wife." Victoria's composure cracked. "You never appreciated what you had in me, always buried in your precious hospital, with your charity cases and impossible hours. Andrew understands ambition." "Security," Victoria's father called sharply, gesturing to the uniformed men at the cathedral entrance. Elijah raised a hand, stopping them with a simple gesture. "That won't be necessary." He turned to the stunned minister. "I believe this ceremony is concluded." Then to the guests, "Please accept my sincere apologies for the inconvenience." With remarkable dignity, he stepped away from the altar and walked directly to Jade, who stood frozen in place, suddenly uncertain what came next. "You should leave now," he said in a low voice meant only for her. "Hamilton security won't be gentle, regardless of what you've done for me today." A commotion erupted near the altar as Victoria collapsed in a theatrical display of distress, her mother rushing to her side while her father approached Elijah with undisguised fury. "I have a car waiting outside," Jade whispered urgently. "You should come with me." For a moment Elijah hesitated, years of social conditioning warring with the betrayal still fresh in his mind. Then, in a decision that would alter both their destinies, he gave a barely perceptible nod. They slipped out through a side door as chaos consumed the cathedral behind them. Outside in the brilliant Charleston sunshine, Jade led him to her modest sedan parked on a side street. "Why would you risk everything to help a stranger?" Elijah finally asked as they drove away, the cathedral spires diminishing in the rearview mirror. Jade kept her eyes on the road, knuckles white against the steering wheel. "Because I've seen what happens when someone marries a lie," she answered simply. "No one deserves that pain, not even a Blackwood." The ghost of a smile touched Elijah's lips as he stared out the window, his wedding day transforming into something entirely unexpected. "Where are we going?" he asked, loosening his bow tie with one fluid motion. "Anywhere you want," Jade replied. Today seems like a good day for new beginnings. As they drove along the coast, neither could have imagined how prophetic those words would prove to be. Chapter 2. Dangerous Temptation. The sunset painted Charleston Harbor in shades of amber and gold as Jade stood at the overlook, her hands gripping the weathered railing. 6 hours had passed since the wedding disaster. Hours spent driving Elijah along the coastline in awkward silence before dropping him at his downtown apartment. She had fled immediately, unable to face the growing weight of consequences from her actions. Now, watching sailboats return to harbor, she wondered if she'd made a catastrophic mistake. By tomorrow, Victoria's family would ensure she'd never work as an event planner in Charleston again. The thought sent a shiver through her despite the balmy evening air. "You're a difficult woman to find," a deep voice said behind her. Jade turned to find Elijah approaching, transformed from the formal groom of hours earlier. He wore faded jeans and a simple grey Henley, his dark hair tousled by the ocean breeze. He looked younger, more approachable, yet the intensity in his eyes remained unchanged. "How did you find me?" Jade asked, fighting the urge to retreat. "Small town," he replied with a shrug. "And you mentioned this was your thinking spot when you drove me home. I don't remember saying that." "You did." He moved beside her at the railing, leaving careful distance between them. "I listen well. Occupational hazard of being a doctor." The harbor lights began twinkling on as dusk deepened around them. Neither spoke for several minutes, the rhythm of waves against the sea wall filling the silence. "The Hamiltons are saying you fabricated everything," Elijah finally said, his voice carefully neutral. "They're claiming it was an elaborate scheme to extort money." Jade's heart sank. That didn't take long. Victoria's father has considerable influence with the local press. His gaze remained fixed on the horizon. "By morning, your name will be dragged through every gossip column from here to Savannah." "I knew the risks," Jade said quietly, though her stomach twisted at the reality now facing her. Elijah turned to study her, curiosity evident in his expression. "That's what I can't understand. Why would you risk everything to help a stranger? Your reputation, your career, you've sacrificed them all for someone you barely know." The question hung between them as Jade considered how much to reveal. The ocean breeze caught her dress, the emerald fabric dancing around her calves as she chose honesty. 3 years ago, my sister Emma married a man who was only interested in our family's property, a small but valuable stretch of land that had been in our family for generations. Jade's voice grew distant with the painful memory. By the time she discovered his true intentions, it was too late. He'd manipulated her into signing over everything. She took a steadying breath before continuing. "Emma couldn't bear the humiliation. She tried to take her own life. She survived, but something inside her didn't. I watched my vibrant, beautiful sister sink into depression that no amount of therapy could touch." "I'm sorry," Elijah said softly. "When I saw those photos of Victoria with your cousin, I recognized the same calculating look I'd seen in my brother-in-law's eyes." Jade finally met his gaze directly. "I couldn't stay silent and watch another person be destroyed by someone who viewed them as nothing more than a stepping stone." The vulnerability in her admission hung in the air between them. Elijah moved closer, his shoulder nearly touching hers at the railing. "Where is your sister now?" he asked. "Colorado. She's slowly rebuilding her life, away from the memories." Jade managed a small smile. "She works at a wildlife rehabilitation center. The animals don't judge or betray." Elijah nodded thoughtfully. "And your parents?" "Car accident when I was 20. Emma was 17. The familiar pain surfaced briefly before Jade tucked it away. "It's been just us ever since." "You've carried a lot on your shoulders," he observed. Jade shrugged, uncomfortable with his perception. Everyone has their burdens. True, Elijah agreed, but not everyone would risk themselves for a stranger's happiness. The intensity of his gaze made her turn away, focusing instead on a distant lighthouse blinking to life against the darkening sky. "I should thank you properly," he continued. "Would you have dinner with me? There's a small place on Queen Street." "I don't need your gratitude," Jade interrupted, suddenly wary. "And you don't owe me anything." "This isn't about obligation," Elijah said, the hint of a smile warming his features. "Maybe I simply want to know the woman brave enough to crash the society wedding of the year." Despite herself, Jade felt an answering smile tug at her lips. "I'm pretty sure having dinner with the jilted groom would complete my social suicide in this town." "Probably," he agreed with unexpected lightness, "though I think that ship has sailed for both of us." He studied her with renewed interest. "You know what the strangest part of today was? When you stepped forward in that church, I felt relief." The confession lingered between them, shifting the atmosphere. A sail snapped sharply on a nearby boat, punctuating the moment. "It's been a surreal day for both of us," Jade said carefully. "You narrowly escaped a disastrous marriage, and I've likely burned every professional bridge in the Low Country. Maybe what we both need is space to process." Elijah's expression remained unreadable as he nodded slowly. "Space," he repeated, the word sounding like a question. "Is that really what you want right now? To be alone with the wreckage?" The harbour lights reflected in his dark eyes, and Jade found herself unable to look away. Something electric shimmered in the narrow space between them, a dangerous, unexpected current. "What I want," Jade began, then stopped herself, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "Tell me," Elijah urged, his voice dropping to a near whisper. The gathering darkness wrapped around them like a cocoon, creating an intimate world separate from the day's chaos. Jade felt the last of her carefully constructed defenses wavering. "This is crazy," she murmured, even as she found herself leaning imperceptibly closer to him. Elijah reached up, his fingertips just barely brushing her cheek, sending ribbons of warmth through her skin. "Stay with me tonight," he whispered against her ear. "No promises, no tomorrow, just tonight." "We're strangers," Jade protested weakly, even as her body betrayed her, responding to his proximity with a yearning that shocked her with its intensity. "Are we?" Elijah challenged softly. "You know the truth of me when my fiancé of 2 years didn't. You saw what no one else bothered to see." His hand slipped to the small of her back, warm and steady against the thin fabric of her dress. Every rational thought in Jade's mind screamed caution, yet she couldn't deny the magnetic pull between them. "This is madness," she breathed, even as her body leaned toward his, drawn by forces beyond her control. "Sometimes madness is exactly what we need to feel alive again," he answered, his breath warm against her lips in the moment before they met hers. The kiss began tentatively, a question asked and answered in the gentle press of lips. Then hunger took over, months of Elijah's buried doubts and Jade's lonely strength dissolving in a surge of unexpected passion. His hands tangled in her hair as hers gripped the soft fabric of his shirt, both clinging to this inexplicable connection like survivors of a shipwreck. When they finally broke apart, breathing heavily, the harbour had fallen into full darkness, stars appearing one by one overhead. Reality hovered at the edges of their shared moment, waiting to intrude. "Your car or mine?" Elijah asked, his forehead resting against hers. Jade closed her eyes, knowing this was her last chance to make the sensible choice. Tomorrow would bring consequences, regrets, complications. The rational decision would be to walk away. "Yours," she answered instead, choosing madness over reason for perhaps the first time in her responsible life. "Let's take yours." As Elijah led her to his waiting car, his fingers intertwined with hers, Jade surrendered to the recklessness of the moment. Just this once, she would follow impulse rather than caution, desire rather than duty. Just this once, she would allow herself to fall. Chapter 3. Life-changing news. 6 weeks after the wedding that never was, Jade stood frozen in her bathroom, staring at 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test. Her hands trembled as she sank onto the edge of the bathtub, the small plastic stick representing a future she had never anticipated. "This isn't happening," she whispered to her reflection. One night. They had shared just one night of passionate connection before dawn brought sobriety and caution rushing back. Jade had slipped away from Elijah's apartment as the first hints of sunrise painted the Charleston sky, leaving nothing but a hastily scrawled note. "Thank you for making me feel alive again. Some madness is best left as a beautiful memory. J." She hadn't seen or spoken to him since, though she'd heard plenty about him. Charleston thrived on gossip, and Dr. Elijah Blackwood's aborted wedding had provided weeks of speculation. Word had spread that he'd retreated to his family's isolated coastal property. The ringing of her cell phone startled her. The caller ID showed Charleston Medical Board, sending a spike of confusion through her. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "This is Marjorie Winters, Secretary to the Charleston Medical Ethics Committee. We've been attempting to reach you regarding the complaint filed against Dr. Elijah Blackwood. As the primary witness named in the documentation, your statement is required for the upcoming hearing." "I'm sorry. What complaint?" "I haven't filed anything against Dr. Blackwood. The complaint was filed by Roger Hamilton, alleging Dr. Blackwood compromised patient care due to his relationship with you while you were employed at Hamilton Estate. The ethics hearing is scheduled for next Thursday." After ending the call, Jade sat in stunned silence. Victoria's father was clearly exacting revenge, not just on her, but on Elijah as well. A threat to his medical license struck at the very core of his identity. Her hand moved unconsciously to her still flat abdomen. The situation had just become exponentially more complicated. The drive to Blackwood Haven took nearly an hour, following winding coastal roads. The grand Queen Anne-style home appeared as she rounded the final curve, its weathered blue clapboard and beautiful trim glowing in the late afternoon sun. Before she could knock, the door swung open to reveal Elijah, unshaven and noticeably thinner than when she'd last seen him. "Jade," he said, her name sounding like both a question and an answer. "I need to talk to you," she said simply. "The Medical Ethics Committee called me this morning. Victoria's father has filed a complaint against you." Elijah's expression hardened. "I received notice of the hearing yesterday. Roger Hamilton is not a man who accepts defeat graciously." "Your medical license is at risk," Jade said, unable to mask her concern. "My reputation survived a spectacularly failed wedding," Elijah interrupted with unexpected lightness. "I suspect it will weather this storm as well." He studied her face carefully. "But something tells me you didn't drive all this way simply to warn me about Roger Hamilton's vendetta." The moment had arrived. "I'm pregnant," she said, the words hanging in the space between them. She watched as Elijah processed this information, his physician's composure giving nothing away except for a slight widening of his eyes. "You're certain?" he asked quietly. "I took 3 tests. All positive." Jade lifted her chin. "I don't expect anything from you. I simply felt you had the right to know, especially with everything else happening." Elijah leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his gaze never leaving hers. "And what are you planning to do?" "I'm keeping the baby," she replied without hesitation. For several long moments, Elijah remained silent. Then he stood abruptly, pacing toward the windows that framed the Atlantic horizon. "We should get married," he said finally. The words hit Jade like a physical blow. "What?" "Marriage would provide security for the child. My family name, financial stability." "I didn't come here for a proposal," Jade interrupted, rising to her feet, "especially not one based on obligation rather than feeling." "This isn't about obligation," Elijah countered, closing the distance between them. "This is about responsibility, about doing what's right for our child." "Our child," Jade repeated, the phrase sounding strange yet undeniable. "A child conceived during one night of what you yourself called madness. That's hardly a foundation for marriage." His eyes softened unexpectedly. "That night with you was the first time I felt anything real in years," he admitted quietly. "Perhaps that's worth building upon." Jade shook her head, fighting the pull she still felt toward him. "I won't trap you in a loveless marriage. I've seen what that does to people." "Then let's change that," Elijah said. "Move in here. The East Wing has private quarters. You'd have your own space. We could take time to see if there's something between us worth nurturing." A sharp knock at the front door interrupted their standoff. Elijah returned moments later, his expression grim as he held out an official-looking envelope. "Formal notice of the ethics hearing," he replied, scanning the document, "and a temporary suspension of my hospital privileges pending the investigation." Jade felt the blood drain from her face. "This is my fault. If I hadn't come to your wedding—" "No," Elijah said firmly. "The fault lies with Victoria and her family. You saved me from a lifetime bound to their deceit." He moved closer, his gaze intense. "We're connected now, Jade. Whether through circumstance or fate or our own recklessness, we're in this together." She felt the weight of his words, heavy with implications neither of them had anticipated 6 weeks ago. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, mirroring the uncertainty of their future. "I need time," Jade finally said. "This is all happening so fast." Elijah nodded, respecting her request, though tension remained evident in his posture. "At least stay for dinner," he suggested. "There's much we should discuss, regardless of what comes next." As thunder rumbled in the distance, Jade found herself accepting his invitation, knowing that every minute spent in Elijah's presence drew her deeper into a connection neither had sought, but neither could deny. Chapter 4. Emotional Battleground. Morning sickness was a misnomer, Jade decided as she leaned over the toilet for the third time that afternoon. She rinsed her mouth, catching her pale reflection in the mirror of her grandmother's bathroom. "Just a stomach bug, Gran," Jade called when her grandmother inquired, the lie bitter on her tongue. She had yet to share her pregnancy news, fearing both disappointment and worry. Margaret Collins ran Collins Family Florists with unwavering dedication despite arthritis that gnarled her once nimble fingers. "That's the third time this week you've been sick," Margaret observed when Jade emerged. "When do you plan to tell me about the baby?" Jade froze, shocked into silence by her grandmother's perception. "I raised 2 daughters and helped with 3 grandchildren," Margaret explained. "I recognize the signs." The shop bell tinkled as the door opened. Elijah himself stood in the entrance, carrying a wicker basket. "I've brought some things that might help with morning sickness," he said, setting the basket on the counter, "though I see I'm not sharing any news you don't already know." Margaret discreetly disappeared into the back room, leaving them alone. "You didn't need to come all this way," Jade said, eyeing the basket warily. "Apparently I did." Elijah moved closer, his clinical gaze assessing her pallor. "You look exhausted." "I made soup," Elijah said, opening the basket. "I delivered twins at 3 this morning, then spent 2 hours making this because I couldn't stop thinking about you." Despite her determination to maintain emotional distance, Jade felt touched by his thoughtfulness. Their conversation was interrupted when Victoria Hamilton burst into the shop, her perfect appearance a stark contrast to the ugliness of her expression. "So the rumors are true," she said, her voice sharp. "How convenient that you found a replacement so quickly, Elijah." "This is a private business, Victoria," Elijah replied, placing himself slightly between Victoria and Jade. "Oh, I'm not staying," Victoria replied with venomous sweetness. "I simply wanted to see what kind of woman spreads her legs for a man hours after ruining his wedding." "That's enough," Elijah said, his voice carrying the authority that silenced interns at the hospital. "Say another word, and I'll have a restraining order filed before sunset." Victoria's perfect features tightened with rage. "When he gets bored playing savior to strays, don't say I didn't warn you." With that parting shot, she flounced out. "Is that what I am?" Jade asked quietly. "A rejection of everything she represents?" "You are nothing like her," Elijah said with conviction. "You risked everything to prevent a stranger from making a terrible mistake." Their moment was interrupted by a sharp cramp that caused Jade to gasp and curl forward. Elijah's medical training took over instantly, his hand steadying her as another spasm hit. "How long have you been having these pains?" he demanded. Without answering, Elijah lifted her into his arms, just as Margaret emerged from the back room. "She needs to get to the hospital," Elijah explained. "Spotting an early pregnancy can be normal, but these cramps need evaluation." At Charleston Memorial, Elijah's name opened doors immediately, despite his suspended status. Within minutes, Jade found herself in an examination room as a sonographer prepared an ultrasound. The room fell silent as they waited for the image to appear. Then, impossibly small but unmistakable, a fluttering pulse appeared. "Heartbeat is strong at 174 beats per minute," the sonographer announced, "consistent with 8 weeks gestation." Later, after Jade had been admitted for observation and her grandmother had gone to fetch overnight essentials, Elijah sat beside her hospital bed. "The bleeding should stop with rest," he explained, "but you'll need to take it easy for the next few weeks." "That's not really possible," Jade said gently. "The shop needs me, especially with Gran's arthritis getting worse." "Then let me help," he insisted. "Move into Blackwood Haven, at least temporarily." "You can't control everything with your medical degree," she said softly. "I'm not trying to control you," Elijah replied, vulnerability breaking through his composure. "I'm terrified of losing you both before I've had the chance to learn who you truly are." In that unguarded moment, something shifted between them, something deeper than physical attraction or shared circumstance. 2 weeks, she finally agreed. "I'll stay at Blackwood Haven for 2 weeks while we get through the hearing and make sure the baby is stable." She held his gaze steadily. "But I need your word that you won't try to manage my life." "You have my word," he promised, the sincerity in his voice leaving no room for doubt. Outside the hospital window, a summer storm gathered strength, lightning flashing against the darkening sky. As thunder rolled across the harbor, Jade realized they were embarking on a journey far more complex than either had imagined when their paths first crossed. Chapter 5. Reluctant Surrender. Blackwood Haven possessed a tranquility Jade hadn't experienced since childhood summers spent at her grandfather's lake cabin. From the guest cottage's expansive porch, she watched the Atlantic surf crash against the rocky shoreline 50 yards away, the rhythmic sound a natural lullaby that eased her perpetual tension. "Tea's ready," Elijah announced, emerging from the cottage with 2 steaming mugs. 10 days into her stay, they had developed a comfortable routine of shared breakfasts and evening conversations on this porch, the wicker chairs positioned to capture both the ocean view and the breeze. "Thanks." Jade accepted the herbal blend he'd concocted specifically for her pregnancy symptoms. "The nausea's actually better today." "You're entering the 2nd trimester soon," Elijah noted, settling beside her. Many women find their symptoms improve around 12 weeks. Jade smiled faintly. There he goes, Dr. Blackwood making an appearance. Force of habit, Elijah admitted with an answering smile, though I suspect my medical credentials may soon be in question. The Ethics Committee hearing loomed just 2 days away. Despite their legal team's confidence, the uncertainty weighed heavily on both of them. Jade had spent hours rehearsing her testimony with Elijah's attorney, determined to protect his reputation and career from Roger Hamilton's vindictive attack. "Your attorney seems certain the complaint will be dismissed," Jade said, more to reassure herself than him. "Lawrence is paid to project confidence," Elijah replied, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "But Roger Hamilton chairs the hospital board and has allies on the ethics committee. This won't be a fair fight." His pessimism troubled Jade. The Elijah she'd come to know during their time together was many things: reserved, occasionally controlling, intensely private, but never defeatist. "Something else is bothering you," she observed. "What aren't you telling me?" Elijah hesitated, weighing his words carefully. Another habit she'd noticed. He measured his speech as precisely as medication doses. "I received a call from Dr. Diana Winters yesterday," he finally said. "She's arriving in Charleston tomorrow." The name meant nothing to Jade, but Elijah's subtle tension spoke volumes. "And Dr. Winters is my former mentor from Johns Hopkins. She runs the International Medical Relief Foundation now." He set his mug down precisely on the table between them. "She's offering me a position heading their trauma surgery initiative in Switzerland." The revelation struck Jade with unexpected force. Switzerland. An ocean away from Charleston, from her grandmother's shop, from everything familiar. "That sounds like an incredible opportunity," she managed to say, fighting to keep her voice neutral. "It would certainly solve our current predicament," Elijah acknowledged. "The position comes with diplomatic immunity due to the Foundation's UN affiliation. Hamilton's vendetta couldn't follow me there." "When would you leave?" Jade asked, her hand unconsciously moving to her still flat abdomen. Elijah's gaze followed the gesture. "Diana wants an answer within the month. If I accept, I'd start in September." September. Just 4 months away. 4 months before their child would begin growing without a father present. The thought created a hollow ache in Jade's chest that surprised her with its intensity. "You should take it," she said, the words tasting like ash. "This is your career, your passion. You shouldn't let the Hamiltons take that from you." Elijah studied her face with the focus he likely brought to difficult diagnoses. "The position would include accommodations large enough for a family," he said quietly. "Diana is aware of our situation." The implication hung between them, unspoken but unmistakable. He was asking her to go with him, to leave behind her grandmother, the flower shop, the only home she'd ever known. "Elijah, A sleek silver Mercedes interrupting her response as it crunched up the oyster-shell driveway, coming to a stop near the main house. A tall, elegant woman emerged, her silver-streaked dark hair caught in a sophisticated twist. Even from a distance, her commanding presence was evident in her perfect posture and purposeful stride. "That's Diana," Elijah said unnecessarily, rising from his chair. "She's early." Jade stood as well, suddenly conscious of her simple sundress and bare feet. "I should give you privacy for your meeting." "No," Elijah said firmly, surprising her. "I'd like you to meet her. She's been an important part of my life." As they walked across the lawn toward the main house, Elijah briefly explained that Diana Winters had been chief of trauma surgery during his residency, becoming both mentor and friend. She had championed his career, nominating him for fellowships and research opportunities that had established his reputation in vascular trauma surgery. "Elijah," Diana called warmly as they approached, extending her arms for an embrace that Elijah accepted with unusual demonstrativeness. She was strikingly beautiful for a woman Jade guessed to be in her mid-50s, with sharp cheekbones and intelligent dark eyes that evaluated Jade immediately. "Diana, this is Jade Collins," Elijah said, completing the introduction with a formality that emphasized their uncertain relationship status. "Jade, Dr. Diana Winters." "The famous Jade," Diana said with an enigmatic smile, offering a firm handshake. "I've heard quite a bit about you, though Elijah failed to mention how lovely you are." Her gracious words were accompanied by a penetrating assessment that made Jade feel transparent. This woman had known Elijah for years, had shaped his career, and clearly held his respect. The comparison between Diana's sophisticated presence and her own simple circumstances wasn't lost on Jade. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Winters," Jade replied, grateful for her grandmother's insistence on proper manners in all situations. "Elijah speaks very highly of you." "Diana, please," the older woman corrected, "and I hope we'll have time to get better acquainted during my stay. I'm quite interested in the woman who captured Elijah's attention so thoroughly that he's hesitating over the position we've discussed for years." The proprietary note in Diana's voice wasn't lost on Jade, nor was the subtle positioning that placed her closer to Elijah than strictly necessary for conversation. There was history here beyond professional mentorship, history that Diana clearly hadn't relegated entirely to the past. "Why don't we go inside?" Elijah suggested, seemingly oblivious to the undercurrents. "I can give you a tour of the renovations since you last visited." "Wonderful idea," Diana agreed, slipping her arm through Elijah's with practiced ease. "I've always adored Blackwood Haven, such a perfect blend of history and livability." As Jade followed them toward the main house, she couldn't help feeling like an intruder in a narrative that had been unfolding for years before her arrival. The easy familiarity between Elijah and Diana spoke of deep connection, of shared experiences and mutual understanding that Jade couldn't hope to match in the brief time she'd known him. The main house revealed another layer of Elijah's life she had yet to fully comprehend. While the guest cottage was comfortably appointed, the main residence was a showcase of old Southern wealth combined with impeccable taste. Original hardwood floors gleamed beneath Persian rugs. Family portraits dating back generations lined the central hallway, Blackwood ancestors staring down with the same intense dark eyes Elijah had inherited. "Your grandmother's touch is still evident everywhere," Diana observed as they entered the sun-drenched living room. "Though I see you finally updated the kitchen as you always threatened." "Practical necessity," Elijah replied with a smile. "I can't live on takeout forever." "You cook now?" Diana's surprise held affectionate amusement. The man who once considered cold pizza a balanced breakfast. "He makes excellent soup," Jade offered, finding her voice, "and his tea blends have been a lifesaver during morning sickness." The reminder of Jade's pregnancy created a momentary silence. Diana recovered quickly, her smile professional but cooler. How thoughtful. Elijah has always excelled at caring for patients. The subtle relegation of Jade to patient status stung more than she wanted to admit. Before she could respond, Elijah's phone rang with the distinctive tone he used for medical calls. "Excuse me, I need to take this," he said after checking the display. "It's the hospital." As he stepped into another room, Jade found herself alone with Diana, the air between them charged with unspoken assessment. "Please, sit," Diana said, gesturing to the nearest armchair as she settled gracefully on the sofa. "Pregnancy is taxing enough without standing on ceremony." Jade perched on the chair's edge, unwilling to appear too comfortable in this house she didn't belong in. Elijah mentioned you're offering him a position in Switzerland. Yes, heading our trauma surgery initiative, Diana confirmed. It's the culmination of everything we've worked towards since his residency. The foundation treats patients in conflict zones worldwide, develops trauma protocols, and trains local surgeons in advanced techniques. Pride colored her voice. Elijah would transform countless lives with his skills. It sounds perfect for him, Jade acknowledged, the knot in her chest tightening. His commitment to medicine is extraordinary. Diana studied her thoughtfully. May I speak candidly, Jade? Please do. I've known Elijah for over 12 years. I've seen him perform miracles in the operating room, work 36-hour shifts without complaint, and push through physical exhaustion that would destroy lesser surgeons. Diana leaned forward slightly. What I've never seen is Elijah Blackwood make an impulsive decision until you. The observation wasn't accusatory, merely stating facts as Diana saw them. Jade remained silent, allowing her to continue. This situation with the Hamiltons will eventually resolve itself. Elijah's reputation can weather temporary scandal. Diana's gaze was direct and unflinching. But a child, a hasty marriage born of obligation rather than compatibility, those are permanent life alterations that could derail the exceptional career he's built. I've never asked Elijah for marriage, Jade said quietly, or for anything else. Perhaps not directly, Diana conceded, but your very presence here creates expectations. Elijah is, above all else, a man who believes in responsibility and duty. She softened her approach slightly. I'm not questioning your character, Jade. I'm simply concerned that both of you are making life-altering decisions under duress. Before Jade could respond, Elijah returned, his expression troubled. Everything all right? Diana asked, all warmth again. The Ethics Committee has moved up the hearing to tomorrow morning, he said. Apparently, Roger Hamilton has a conflict with the original date. The news sent a spike of anxiety through Jade. One day less to prepare, one day less to calm her nerves. Convenient timing, Diana observed with evident disapproval. Well, I'll certainly adjust my plans to attend as a character witness. My credentials should carry some weight with the committee. Relief softened Elijah's features. Thank you, Diana. That could make a significant difference. Of course, darling. What are old friends for? Diana rose smoothly. Now, I should check into my hotel and let you both prepare for tomorrow. Jade, it was lovely meeting you. Her smile was professional but calculating. I look forward to getting to know you better during my stay. As Diana departed in her sleek Mercedes, Jade remained on the porch, watching until the car disappeared down the winding drive. The conversation had left her unsettled, questioning her place in Elijah's life and future. She means well, Elijah said, appearing beside her. Diana can be intimidating, but she's been an invaluable ally throughout my career. She cares about you, Jade observed neutrally. More than professionally, I think. Elijah looked genuinely surprised by the suggestion. Diana and I have history, but not the kind you're implying. Are you certain she feels the same way? Jade asked quietly. Before Elijah could answer, a sudden dizziness swept over Jade, causing her to sway. Elijah's arms were around her instantly, supporting her with gentle strength. Let's get you back to the cottage, he said, concern replacing all other considerations. You need to rest before tomorrow. As they walked slowly across the lawn, Jade leaned into his support more than she wanted to admit. The confrontation with Diana had drained her limited energy, leaving her questioning everything about her tenuous position in Elijah's life. Later that evening, as they sat on the cottage porch, watching stars emerge over the Atlantic, Jade finally gathered courage to address what had been lingering between them. I can't go to Switzerland with you, she said quietly. "My grandmother needs me. The shop has been in our family for generations. I can't abandon that legacy." Elijah was silent for a long moment, his profile illuminated by moonlight as he gazed out at the ocean. "And our child?" he finally asked. "What legacy will they have if we're separated by an ocean?" "We can find a way to make it work," Jade insisted, though uncertainty colored her voice. "Many families manage with parents in different locations." "Is that what you want for our child? Weekend visits and holiday arrangements?" The edge in Elijah's voice revealed frustration he rarely displayed. "Because that's not what I want, Jade." "Not at all." "What do you want, Elijah?" she challenged gently, "beyond fulfilling your sense of obligation?" He turned to face her directly, moonlight catching the intensity in his dark eyes. "I want to know what might exist between us beyond that one night. I want the chance to build something real with you and our child." The raw honesty in his voice stripped away pretense. "But your career—" "My career has been my entire identity for so long," Elijah interrupted. "Perhaps too long." He reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. "I understand feeling responsible for everyone," he said, echoing the burden he'd clearly recognized in her. "I just never imagined finding someone who might share that burden." The simple truth of his statement resonated deeply with Jade. Throughout her life, caring for Emma after their parents' deaths, supporting her grandmother as age limited her capabilities, even intervening at Elijah's wedding, she had shouldered responsibility alone. The possibility of sharing that weight, of having a true partner, was both terrifying and tantalizing. "I can't promise you anything," she said honestly. "I'm still getting to know you, still trying to understand what exists between us, beyond circumstance and attraction." "I'm not asking for promises," Elijah replied. "Just time. Time to discover if what we feel might grow into something worth building a future around." As ocean waves crashed rhythmically against the shore below them, Jade recognized that she stood at a crossroads. Diana's warning echoed in her mind, cautioning against impulsive decisions. Yet somewhere beyond caution lay the possibility of connection she had never allowed herself to imagine. "One day at a time," she finally agreed, her fingers tightening around his. "Starting with getting through tomorrow's hearing." Elijah's answering smile held both relief and tentative hope. "One day at a time," he repeated, the phrase a contract neither took lightly. As stars wheeled overhead and waves continued their ancient rhythm against the shore, Jade felt something shift within her, a reluctant surrender to possibility after a lifetime of careful restraint. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it not as strangers thrust together by circumstance, but as two people cautiously exploring the unexpected connection that had begun on a summer afternoon in St. Michael's Cathedral. Chapter 6. Family Wounds. The Charleston Medical Board's hearing room possessed all the warmth of a mausoleum. Jade sat rigid on an uncomfortable wooden bench, watching 7 committee members file in with solemn expressions. Beside her, Elijah maintained perfect composure, though the slight tension in his jaw betrayed his concern. After 3 hours of questioning, Jade had recounted her employment at Hamilton Estate, confirmed the timeline of her interactions with Elijah, and repeatedly refuted accusations of inappropriate conduct. "The committee calls Dr. Diana Winters," the chairperson announced. Diana entered with commanding presence, her credentials impeccable as she detailed her long professional relationship with Elijah. Her testimony painted him as exceptional, dedicated, ethical, and committed to patient care. Roger Hamilton's attorney leaned forward. "And this professional association included a romantic relationship with Dr. Blackwood, did it not?" Dr. Blackwood and I briefly dated during his final year as an attending at Johns Hopkins, Diana replied with perfect composure. Our relationship has been strictly professional for the past 5 years. The revelation struck Jade with unexpected force. Elijah had explicitly denied any romantic history when she'd questioned him. By late afternoon, the committee announced they would deliberate before delivering their decision. Outside the hearing room, uncomfortable silence descended between them as they walked to the parking garage. "You lied to me," Jade said quietly. "You said there was no history between you and Diana." "I said not the kind you were implying," Elijah replied. "We dated briefly, years ago. It wasn't serious." As they crossed the causeway to Blackwood Haven, Elijah broke the silence. "I've been invited to my father's birthday dinner tomorrow night," he said. "He specifically requested that you join us. Your father wants to meet me. Why? Blackwood family tradition dictates that all potential family connections are evaluated by the patriarch," Elijah explained stiffly. The Blackwood family estate made Blackwood Haven look modest by comparison. Situated on Charleston's historic battery, the antebellum mansion stood as testament to generations of wealth. James Blackwood rose from his armchair, silver-haired and distinguished in a perfectly tailored suit. Though in his 70s, he carried himself with military precision, his handshake firm as he greeted his son with formal correctness rather than paternal warmth. "Father, may I present Jade Collins," Elijah said. "Jade, my father, Dr. James Blackwood." The elder Blackwood's assessment was immediate and thorough. "Miss Collins, I've heard a great deal about your intervention at my son's wedding." Dinner unfolded in the formal dining room beneath a crystal chandelier, conversation flowing with practiced Southern civility. "Elijah tells me you're working in your grandmother's flower shop," James remarked. "Quite a change from event coordination at Hamilton Estate." "My grandmother has arthritis," Jade explained evenly. "The business has been in our family for 3 generations." "What college did you attend, Miss Collins?" James continued. "I attended Charleston Community College while raising my younger sister after our parents died," Jade replied. "I've been taking night courses in business administration for the past 2 years." "Miss Collins essentially raised her sister from the age of 17, Elijah interjected, a defensive edge entering his voice, "while maintaining their household and working full-time." James offered a thin smile. Resourceful, though hardly the background one might expect for a Blackwood connection. "Speaking of the future," James continued smoothly, "Diana tells me you've been offered the directorship in Switzerland, Elijah." "An extraordinary opportunity." "I haven't made a decision yet," Elijah replied carefully. "What's to decide?" James asked with subtle sharpness. "Unless something has complicated your professional priorities." His gaze flickered meaningfully toward Jade. Before Elijah could respond, a staff member approached with an envelope on a silver tray. "The Ethics Committee has reached a decision," Elijah announced after reading the message. "All charges have been dismissed. My hospital privileges will be fully reinstated tomorrow." "Excellent news," James declared. "A Blackwood vindicated as expected, though I hope this experience teaches you to be more judicious in your associations." The subtle condemnation pushed Elijah beyond his careful restraint. "My association with Jade prevented me from entering a fraudulent marriage," he said, steel entering his voice. "Victoria Hamilton was involved with my cousin Andrew and planned to contest grandmother's will. Jade discovered their scheme and risked her reputation to warn me." "Victoria Hamilton comes from one of Charleston's finest families," James countered dismissively. "That's enough," Elijah said sharply. "Jade gave up her position, her professional reputation, and risked legal retaliation from the Hamiltons to prevent me from making a catastrophic mistake." The elder Blackwood's expression grew increasingly cold. and now finds herself conveniently carrying the Blackwood heir. How remarkably fortunate. Elijah rose to his feet, napkin thrown aside with uncharacteristic loss of control. Jade gave up college to raise her brother after their parents died in an accident, he declared, voice resonating with suppressed fury. She works 16-hour days at her grandmother's shop while taking night classes. She has more integrity than anyone in this room, myself included. The drive back to Blackwood Haven passed in charged silence. When they finally arrived, Elijah led Jade to the porch overlooking the ocean. "I apologize for my father," Elijah finally said. "That went exactly as badly as I feared it might." "Why did you defend me that way?" Jade asked quietly. "You've never spoken to your father like that before, have you?" Elijah considered the question. "Because for the first time," he answered slowly, "I found myself fighting for what matters, not what looks proper." The simple truth in his words created a shift between them. For weeks, Jade had questioned Elijah's motives, assuming his interest stemmed primarily from obligation. His defense tonight had revealed something deeper, a genuine appreciation of her character. "Your father will never approve of me," she said, stating the obvious. "Probably not," Elijah agreed with surprising lightness, "though Aunt Catherine clearly adores you already." As the moon traced its path across the star-filled sky, Jade felt another barrier dissolve between them, not through passion or circumstance this time, but through honest recognition of the wounds they each carried from their pasts and the healing they might find together. Chapter 7. Healing Touch. 3 weeks after the disastrous dinner with Elijah's father, Jade had settled into an unexpected rhythm at Blackwood Haven. What had begun as a temporary arrangement during her pregnancy complications had gradually evolved into something resembling domestic partnership. Mornings found them sharing breakfast on the cottage porch, evenings often spent in comfortable conversation as waves crashed against the rocky shore below. With his hospital privileges restored, Elijah had returned to surgery, often arriving home with the focused intensity that accompanied challenging cases. Jade had learned to recognize when he needed silence to process the day's events and when conversation would help untangle his thoughts. One rainy afternoon, restless from confinement and bored with reading, Jade wandered through the main house's rarely used third floor. In a dust-covered storage room, she discovered a collection of art supplies, quality brushes, unopened paints, and several blank canvases. "They were my grandmother's," Elijah explained when he found her examining the treasures. "She painted seascapes that captured the coast's many moods." "May I?" Jade asked, fingers already itching to hold a brush after years without indulging her artistic side. Elijah's surprised smile revealed a boyish quality rarely glimpsed beneath his professional reserve. "Of course, though we can do better than this dusty attic." 2 days later, Jade returned from visiting her grandmother to find the main house's sunroom transformed. The wicker furniture had been replaced with an easel and art table positioned to capture perfect north light. Supplies arranged with surgical precision awaited her touch, brushes from sable to bristle, paints in every conceivable hue, canvases of varying sizes. "You did all this?" Jade asked, stunned by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "The room was wasted on occasional reading," Elijah replied, with attempted nonchalance, though his eyes revealed he understood the significance of his gift. "Your grandmother mentioned you studied art before your parents' accident." Tears threatened as Jade ran her fingers over the pristine supplies. "My grandmother always said I'd never find a man who saw beyond my practicality to my passion," she admitted, brushing moisture from her eyes. "I see all of you," Elijah said simply, fingers lightly tracing her cheek. "Everything you hide from the world." The moment held something profound, recognition beyond physical attraction or shared circumstance. Jade found herself leaning toward him, her body responding to the magnetic pull that had existed since their first meeting. Their second kiss happened naturally, acknowledgement of feelings neither had expected to discover. Unlike the desperate passion of their first night together, this connection carried tender exploration, the beginning of something built on understanding rather than impulse. A week later, Jade stood at the sunroom easel, utterly absorbed in capturing the approaching storm on canvas. Weather alerts had been blaring all morning as Hurricane Celeste, strengthened offshore, projected to make landfall south of Charleston by evening. "You should be resting," Elijah observed from the doorway, medical bag in hand. "I'm fine," Jade replied without breaking concentration, adding angry brushstrokes to represent churning waves. "The baby's been active all morning. I've been called to the hospital to help with emergency preparations," Elijah said reluctantly. "I shouldn't be gone more than a few hours." "Go," Jade encouraged. "I've survived hurricanes before. I'll stay in the cottage. It weathered Hugo without a scratch, according to your housekeeper." Despite her reassurances, Elijah insisted on showing her the emergency generator, satellite phone, and fully stocked safe room in the main house's basement before departing. His protective instincts, once smothering, now felt comforting as her pregnancy progressed. The storm intensified faster than predicted. By late afternoon, rain lashed the windows with frightening force as wind howled around the cottage eaves. Jade paced uneasily, one hand pressed against her growing belly while watching trees bend horizontally in the punishing gale. When sharp cramping doubled her over mid-step, fear replaced discomfort. A warm wetness between her thighs confirmed her worst fears. Blood, bright red against her pale clothing. The landline was already dead. Her cell phone showed no service as the storm interfered with transmission. The quarter-mile to the main house might as well have been miles in the sideways rain and debris-filled wind. Another cramp seized her, stronger than the first. Jade forced herself to breathe through the pain, mentally calculating her options. The baby. She had to protect their baby. Wrapping herself in a rain jacket, she stepped onto the porch just as headlights cut through the gloom. Elijah's car fish-tailed up the drive, relief flooding through her at the sight. He reached her in seconds, medical training overriding everything as he assessed her condition. "How long has the bleeding been happening?" "Any clots?" "Rate the pain on a scale of 1 to 10. "Started 20 minutes ago," Jade managed through clenched teeth. "No clots yet. Pain is 7 and climbing." Elijah carried her to the main house, his strength steady despite the raging storm. Inside, he transformed the living room into a makeshift examination room with practiced efficiency, laying out medical supplies from his bag while issuing calm instructions. "I need to examine you," he explained, all personal connections subsumed by professional focus. "The hospital is inaccessible. Roads are already underwater. We have to manage this ourselves." Jade nodded through another contraction, fear evident in her wide eyes. "The baby." "I'll do everything possible," Elijah promised, his steady hands belying the concern in his expression. The examination was thorough and clinical, Elijah's years of training evident in every precise movement. When he finally looked up, cautious relief had replaced his grave concern. "Placental edge separation," he diagnosed. "Minor but concerning. Your cervix remains closed, which is excellent news." He prepared a syringe with practiced hands. "This will help reduce contractions." Outside, the hurricane reached full intensity, windows rattling in their frames as the historic house creaked against nature's onslaught. Inside, another battle raged. Medicine against complication, love against fear. "Tell me what to do," Jade pleaded, as another contraction gripped her. "Breathe with me," Elijah directed, demonstration slow inhalations. "Visualization helps. Imagine your blood vessels constricting, bleeding, slowing." Hours passed in tense vigilance. Elijah monitored vital signs with makeshift equipment, administered medication with precise timing, and spoke in the soothing tones reserved for frightened patients. When the bleeding finally slowed, dawn was breaking through storm-battered windows. "You're stabilizing," Elijah confirmed, exhaustion evident in the shadows beneath his eyes. "Both your pulse and blood pressure are improving." Only then did he allow himself to collapse beside her on the sofa, medical mask of composure cracking to reveal genuine terror. "I've never been so frightened," he admitted, voice raw with emotion. "Not in the operating room, not during disaster relief missions, never." "We're okay," Jade assured him, guiding his hand to feel the reassuring flutter of movement in her belly. "You saved us." "I almost lost you both," Elijah whispered, professional detachment entirely gone. His fingers trembled against her skin, revealing vulnerability he'd never shown before. "If I hadn't forgotten those case files." "But you did," Jade said simply. "You came back at exactly the right moment." In the hurricane's aftermath, something fundamental had shifted between them. Elijah's controlled facade had crumbled completely, revealing the depth of feelings he'd kept carefully contained. Jade had glimpsed the man behind the doctor, behind the Blackwood name, a man whose carefully constructed walls had finally begun to fall. As they lay together in exhausted relief, the hurricane gradually subsiding outside, Jade recognized that their relationship had weathered its own storm. Whatever came next, they had already survived the unimaginable together. Chapter 8. Trust. Betrayed. Charleston sparkled after the hurricane, washed clean by fierce rains that had thankfully caused minimal damage to the historic district. 2 weeks after the storm, Jade's pregnancy had stabilized enough for her doctor to permit limited activities, including a much-needed visit to her grandmother's shop. Margaret Collins embraced her granddaughter with visible relief, her keen eyes assessing Jade's improved color and the now obvious curve of her belly. "You look better," Margaret declared, guiding Jade to the shop's comfortable back office. "That young doctor of yours must be taking good care." "Elijah's been attentive," Jade acknowledged, smiling despite herself. The hurricane night had marked a turning point in their relationship, vulnerability creating connection where caution had once prevailed. "Has he convinced you to marry him yet?" Margaret asked bluntly, ever practical. "Gran!" Jade protested, though without real indignation. "We're still getting to know each other. The circumstances of our relationship aren't exactly conventional." "Neither were your grandfather and I," Margaret remarked, arranging teacups with arthritic but determined fingers. "He proposed 3 times before I said yes. Good men are worth making certain of." Their conversation turned to shop matters, orders that needed fulfilling, accounts requiring attention, decisions postponed during Jade's absence. As they reviewed the ledgers, an unfamiliar account notation caught Jade's attention. "What's this payment from Coastal Educational Trust?" she asked, pointing to a substantial monthly deposit. Margaret looked momentarily flustered, an unusual sight in a woman known for unflappable composure. "Just a corporate account," she said vaguely, "ordered arrangements for their offices." Something in her grandmother's evasion triggered Jade's suspicion. Further investigation revealed identical payments dating back 3 months, coinciding exactly with Jade's move to Blackwood Haven. "Gran," Jade said slowly, "these payments started the same week I told you about the baby, and there's no record of actual flower deliveries." Margaret sighed, setting down her teacup. "I promised not to tell you." "Tell me what?" Jade asked, though growing certainty already tightened her chest. "Dr. Blackwood came to see me the day after you told him about the pregnancy," Margaret admitted. "He wanted to help without wounding your pride, so he established a corporate account with the shop." "He's been secretly supporting the business?" Jade clarified, disbelief warring with rising anger. "The shop needed the income with you away," Margaret explained practically. "And it allowed me to hire temporary help." The revelation disturbed Jade more than she could immediately articulate. While she appreciated Elijah's concern for her grandmother, his decision to act without consulting her felt like a fundamental breach of trust, reminiscent of other men who had made decisions for the Collins women without their input or consent. "There's something else," Margaret added reluctantly. "He's also been paying Ben's college tuition." "My brother's tuition," Jade repeated incredulously. "How is that even possible?" "Benjamin called last month, worried about his scholarship funding after changing majors," Margaret explained. "I mentioned it to Dr. Blackwood during one of his visits. Next thing I knew, Ben called to say his tuition had been covered by a medical education fund." The accumulated revelations left Jade speechless. While still processing this information, her cell phone chimed with a text from Elijah announcing his early return from the hospital. "I need to go," she said abruptly, gathering her purse with trembling hands. "Don't be too hard on him," Margaret cautioned. "His intentions were good, even if his methods were misguided." The thunderstorm that broke over Charleston mirrored Jade's turbulent emotions as she drove to Blackwood Haven. Rain lashed the windshield, blurring her vision as thoroughly as unshed tears. She found Elijah on the main house's covered porch, watching lightning illuminate the angry ocean. His smile of greeting faded quickly as he registered her expression. "Your grandmother told you," he said, resignation replacing welcome. "About the secret payments to her shop? Or about paying my brother's tuition without bothering to consult me?" Jade demanded, heedless of the rain soaking her as she stood at the porch's edge. "Which betrayal of trust were you expecting me to discover first?" Elijah stepped forward, concern replacing defensiveness. "Come inside. You'll catch cold." "I'm not concerned with comfort right now," Jade replied, her voice rising above the storm. "I want answers. What gave you the right to remake my family's finances without my knowledge?" "I was trying to help," Elijah explained, frustration evident in his stance. "Your grandmother's arthritis is worsening. The shop needed support with you here. Your brother's education is my responsibility," Jade interrupted fiercely. "Mine, Elijah, not yours." Lightning cracked overhead, momentarily illuminating the garden in stark relief. Neither moved as thunder followed, the storm intensifying around them. "Do you think your wealth gives you the right to remake my life?" she demanded, rain plastering her hair to her face. "To decide what my family needs without including me in those decisions?" "I did it because I couldn't bear watching you sacrifice everything," Elijah answered, rain disguising the moisture in his eyes. "Not because I expected anything in return." His sincerity only intensified Jade's frustration. "How do I trust anything between us when you make these decisions without me?" she asked, heartbreak evident beneath her anger. "When you decide what's best for my family, as if I'm incapable of managing our lives." "That wasn't my intention," Elijah protested, moving closer despite her rigid posture. "I just wanted to ease your burdens." "By undermining my independence?" Jade countered. "By making financial decisions that should have been ours to make together if we're truly building something here?" The rain had soaked them both now, neither willing to retreat from this crucial confrontation. Lightning illuminated the raw emotion on Elijah's face as he struggled to articulate feelings that clearly didn't come naturally to him. "Control is the only way I've known to protect people," he admitted finally, the confession visibly difficult. "But you're teaching me there are things I can't fix or manage, including your heart." The simple truth of his statement penetrated Jade's anger, revealing the wounded boy beneath the controlled doctor. A child who had learned that perfect management of circumstances was the only protection against pain. "This isn't about your ability to provide," she explained more gently. "It's about partnership, about facing challenges together rather than you silently solving what you perceive as my problems." Elijah nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his expression. "I've spent my entire life learning to fix situations. he acknowledged. Patients, cases, family crises, all problems to solve rather than experiences to share. And I've spent my life fiercely guarding my independence, Jade admitted, her own revelation equally important. Refusing help even when it's offered with genuine care. The rain gentled around them as the worst of the storm passed, leaving them standing in the soft aftermath. Elijah extended his hand across the space between them, a gesture of reconciliation and understanding. "I promise to consult you before making decisions that affect your family," he said with evident sincerity. "No more unilateral solutions, no matter how well-intentioned." Jade hesitated briefly before accepting his outstretched hand. "And I'll try to accept help when it's offered from love rather than control," she conceded. "Though I reserve the right to say no without explanation." "Accepted," Elijah agreed, drawing her carefully closer, "though I reserve the right to occasionally be stubborn about safety matters related to you and the baby." The compromise brought a reluctant smile to Jade's lips. "Doctor's prerogative?" "Father's concern," Elijah corrected gently, his hand moving to rest against her rounded abdomen. The intimate gesture bridged the final distance between them. As rain dripped from the porch ceiling, they stood together in mutual understanding that transcended their conflict. Two independent people learning the delicate balance of partnership, one difficult conversation at a time. "We should get you into dry clothes," Elijah suggested, professional concern returning as he noticed her shiver. Jade nodded, allowing him to guide her inside. The storm had cleared more than the humid Charleston air. It had washed away pretenses between them, revealing deeper understanding of the wounds each carried and the healing they might find together. Chapter 9. Breaking Walls. 7 months into her pregnancy, Jade waddled rather than walked through Blackwood Haven, one hand supporting her lower back as she navigated the sunlit hallway. The baby, already active, seemed determined to train for Olympic gymnastics during her 3rd trimester. "Settle down in there," she murmured, rubbing gentle circles over a particularly forceful kick. "Your father needs to sleep sometime." She smiled at the thought of Elijah's fascination with every movement, his medical knowledge enhancing rather than diminishing his wonder at their growing child. Their relationship had deepened since the thunderstorm confrontation, honesty replacing caution in their daily interactions. Inside Elijah's study, she discovered an official-looking envelope from the International Medical Relief Foundation, addressed in Diana Winter's distinctive handwriting. Though respecting his privacy had become natural, the return address caught her attention. Diana's persistent communications regarding the Switzerland position had become a subtle source of tension. Jade found Elijah in the kitchen, where he'd recently discovered an unexpected talent for baking. Flour dusted his usually impeccable appearance as he measured ingredients with surgical precision. "There's another letter from Diana," Jade said, offering the envelope without preamble. Elijah accepted it with noticeable reluctance, setting aside his project to open the correspondence. His expression remained carefully neutral as he scanned the contents. "The foundation board requires my final decision by Friday," he explained, folding the letter precisely. "Diana has extended the deadline twice already." "You've been avoiding making this decision for months," Jade observed. "Why?" Elijah returned to his baking, focused seemingly on the precise measurement of vanilla extract. "The timing isn't right with the baby coming." "The position includes family accommodations," Jade reminded him, echoing information he'd shared months earlier, "and Switzerland has excellent medical care." "It's not that simple," Elijah replied, his controlled movements betraying underlying tension. "Then explain it to me," Jade urged, resting against the counter as her back protested standing. "Help me understand why you'd reject the position you've apparently worked toward for years." Elijah's precise movements faltered, hands stilling over the half-mixed batter. Something in Jade's persistent questioning had finally broken through his careful composure. Because it wasn't my dream, he admitted, the confession visibly difficult. It was my father's vision for my career, Diana's plan for our professional partnership, never truly mine. The simple truth created profound silence between them. Jade waited, sensing more beneath this initial revelation. I've spent my entire life following carefully constructed expectations, Elijah continued, abandoning the pretense of baking. The perfect Blackwood heir, the brilliant surgical resident, the promising research fellow. Each step predetermined, each achievement immediately overshadowed by the next required advancement. "What do you want?" Jade asked quietly. "Beyond others' expectations." The question seemed to startle him, as if no one had ever posed it quite so directly. "I want to practice medicine that matters," he answered slowly, discovering his truth as he spoke it. "Not research in sterile labs or presentations at international conferences, but direct patient care where it's most needed." "Which doesn't require moving to Switzerland," Jade concluded, understanding dawning. "No," Elijah agreed, meeting her gaze directly. "The Foundation does important work, but primarily through research and policy. I've done that. I'm more effective in the operating room than the conference hall." Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place for Jade. "Is that why you specialized in trauma surgery? Immediate impact rather than long-term research?" "Exactly," Elijah confirmed, surprise evident that she'd understood so intuitively. "Every successful trauma case represents a life definitively saved, a family kept whole, immediate, tangible results." He moved closer, hesitation gone as he took her hands in his. "There's something else you should know," he said, resolution clear in his expression. "The day after our confrontation with my father, he called me to his office." "What happened?" Jade asked, sensing the significance of this previously unmentioned meeting. "He offered an ultimatum," Elijah explained, bitterness briefly coloring his voice. "Accept the Switzerland position and maintain the Blackwood medical legacy, or face consequences." "What consequences could he possibly threaten you with?" Jade asked, incredulous. "You're a respected surgeon with an established reputation." Elijah's expression darkened. "He threatened to reveal confidential information about a former patient, a prominent political figure who sought treatment for mental health issues. Exposure would destroy both the patient's career and my professional credibility for breaching confidentiality." Shock rendered Jade momentarily speechless. "Your father would deliberately harm a patient to control your career choices." "James Blackwood believes the family legacy supersedes individual ethics," Elijah replied with resigned understanding. "He's spent a lifetime protecting the Blackwood name at any cost." "So you rejected the fellowship to protect your patient?" Jade concluded, outrage on his behalf, mingling with profound respect for his decision. "Even knowing what it might cost your career?" "I rejected it for multiple reasons," Elijah corrected, his gaze intensifying as he moved closer. "The patient's confidentiality was paramount, yes, but more significantly." He drew a steadying breath before continuing. "I've spent my career saving strangers while keeping emotional distance. But the thought of being separated from you terrifies me more than admitting how deeply I've fallen in love with you." The declaration hung between them, simple yet profound in its vulnerability. For months they had circled this truth, acknowledging growing connection while avoiding naming the feeling that had developed between them. "Love," Jade repeated softly, testing the word that had entered their relationship by circumstance rather than choice. "I didn't expect it," Elijah admitted, his usual composure entirely absent. "Didn't plan for it, certainly didn't anticipate finding it after the disaster of my almost wedding. But there it is, simple and overwhelming, and completely beyond my control." The irony of this final admission that love had defeated his lifelong attempt to control circumstances brought unexpected tears to Jade's eyes. Before she could respond, sharp pain lanced through her abdomen, driving the breath from her lungs. "Jade!" Elijah's concern transformed instantly to medical alarm as she doubled over, clutching her stomach. "Something's wrong," she gasped, another wave of pain stealing her words. Warm liquid trickled down her legs, not the slow breaking of waters, but a sudden gush that contained unmistakable streaks of bright red blood. Elijah's training took over instantaneously. In fluid, practiced movements, he guided her to the nearest sofa, simultaneously grabbing his phone to call his obstetrical colleague. "Placental abruption," he explained tersely into the phone, fingers finding Jade's pulse with practiced precision. 30 weeks gestation, significant bleeding, patient fully conscious but experiencing intense contractions. Through waves of escalating pain, Jade registered his calm efficiency, even as fear shadowed his eyes. His free hand never left hers, anchor in the storm of pain, threatening to overwhelm her. "The ambulance is 8 minutes out," he relayed, setting aside the phone to focus entirely on her. "I need you to breathe with me, just like we practiced. Shallow breaths through the contractions." Jade nodded, struggling to follow his guidance as another spasm gripped her. "The baby is our priority," Elijah assured her, professional composure belied by the tremor in his hands as he checked her pulse again. "Charleston Memorial's NICU is excellent, and Dr. Reynolds is the best maternal-fetal specialist in the state." His controlled veneer cracked just slightly as he pressed his forehead to hers. "Hold on, Jade," he whispered fiercely. "Just hold on. I can't lose you." The raw fear in his voice penetrated her pain, anchoring her to consciousness when darkness threatened at the edges of her vision. She focused on his face, on the love and terror mingled in his expression, using that connection to fight the pull of increasing blood loss and pain. When paramedics arrived minutes later, Elijah briefed them with professional precision, even as he refused to release Jade's hand. Only when they reached the emergency entrance at Charleston Memorial did he reluctantly step aside, allowing the trauma team to take over. "I love you," Jade managed weakly as they prepared to rush her to surgery, fighting to remain conscious long enough to respond to his earlier declaration. Elijah's composure broke completely as he pressed his lips briefly, desperately to hers. "Fight," he urged, the single word containing every emotion he'd once kept so carefully contained. "Fight to stay with me." As consciousness slipped away, Jade held that request close. The sound of his voice, the touch of his hand, the love finally acknowledged between them, becoming her tether to a world growing increasingly distant as surgical doors swung closed between them. Chapter 10. Between Worlds. White light surrounded Jade, not harsh but softly encompassing, creating a sense of weightless suspension. Pain had vanished, replaced by profound peace, unlike anything she'd experienced. She floated in tranquil silence, time becoming meaningless as the light gently pulsed around her. "Not yet, sweetheart," a familiar voice whispered from the luminescence. "It's not your time." "Mom?" Jade called, recognizing the voice she hadn't heard in 8 years. A figure materialized within the light, her mother as she remembered her, vibrant and smiling. "You need to go back, Jade. They're waiting for you." "Who's waiting?" Jade asked, confused yet strangely unafraid. "Your daughter, Elijah, the family you're creating." Her mother's form began fading. "We'll meet again someday, but not now. Live your life, my brave girl." The peaceful light receded, replaced by antiseptic hospital smells and the rhythmic beeping of monitoring equipment. Pain returned in dull waves, muted by medication but unmistakably present. Jade struggled to open heavy eyelids, consciousness returning in gradual fragments. A warm weight rested against her hand. Through blurred vision, she made out Elijah's form, slumped forward in a chair beside her bed, his head resting on the mattress near their joined hands. Even in sleep, his fingers remained intertwined with hers, unwilling to relinquish connection. She studied him unobserved, taking in the stubbled jaw and rumpled surgical scrubs that suggested he hadn't left her side for considerable time. Dark circles shadowed his closed eyes, his normally perfect appearance completely abandoned in what appeared to be an exhausted vigil. "Elijah," she whispered, her voice raspy from intubation. He woke instantly, physician's instincts overriding exhaustion as his eyes focused with immediate clarity. When he registered her conscious state, profound emotion transformed his features. "Jade," he breathed, the single word containing volumes of relief and fear and gratitude. "You're back." "The baby?" she asked immediately, fear constricting her throat as she struggled to fully awaken. "She's perfect," Elijah assured her, his smile breaking through days of obvious tension. 4 pounds, 3 ounces, but remarkably strong. They've named her a feisty little fighter in the NICU. "She," Jade repeated, joy penetrating the fog of medication. "We have a daughter." "Lily," Elijah supplied, having clearly given this thought. "Unless you prefer something else. She looks like you. Same determined expression." Relief weakened Jade further, tears escaping as she processed what they'd survived. "How long was I unconscious?" Elijah's expression sobered. 3 days. The placental abruption was severe. You lost a significant amount of blood. Clinical description failed to mask the lingering fear in his voice. Dr. Reynolds performed an emergency cesarean, but controlling the hemorrhaging afterward was challenging. She recognized the careful understatement, reading between lines to the crisis Elijah had faced. "Tell me," she requested softly. He hesitated before honesty prevailed. "You were rested on the table," he admitted, voice tightly controlled. "Twice. The second time for nearly 2 minutes." The revelation stunned Jade. She had literally died, if only briefly, perhaps explaining the otherworldly experience she recalled with surprising clarity. "They let you stay during surgery?" she asked, knowing medical protocol typically prevented physicians from attending procedures on family members. "No one could remove me," Elijah confessed, a glimpse of the desperation he must have felt. "Not even hospital security. Eventually Reynolds agreed I could observe from the gallery." The mental image of Elijah, always controlled, always proper, refusing to leave her even against medical protocol, revealed the depth of his fear more clearly than words could express. "I heard my mother's voice," Jade whispered, uncertain how he might receive this information. "In a place of light and peace. She told me to come back to you and our daughter." Rather than dismissing her experience as medication-induced hallucination, Elijah nodded solemnly. "I believe you," he said simply. "Medicine explains much, but not everything about the boundary between life and death." His acceptance of what science couldn't easily explain touched Jade deeply. With tremendous effort, she lifted her free hand to touch his face, fingers tracing the worried lines that hadn't been there before her surgery. "You should rest," she murmured, concerned by his evident exhaustion. "I'm fine," he insisted, though his body belied the claim. "You're not," Jade contradicted gently. "When did you last sleep in an actual bed? Or eat something besides hospital cafeteria food?" "That's not important," Elijah dismissed, his focus entirely on her. "Your recovery and Lily's care are all that matter right now." "You matter," Jade countered firmly, despite her weakness. "You need to take care of yourself to help care for us." Her insistence brought a tired smile to his face. "You nearly died 3 days ago, yet you're concerned about my sleeping habits?" "Someone has to be," she replied with attempted lightness, though the effort exhausted her limited strength. Elijah noticed immediately, adjusting her medication with practiced ease. "Rest now," he urged, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. I'll be here when you wake up." "You should rest too," Jade murmured as medication pulled her toward sleep. "I will," he promised, though they both recognized the lie. When Jade woke again, soft morning light filtered through hospital blinds. She found Elijah in the same chair, medical journals scattered around him as he reviewed research with focused intensity despite obvious fatigue. "You're still here," she observed, voice stronger than during their previous conversation. Elijah looked up immediately, setting aside his reading. "Where else would I be?" The simple question contained profound meaning that stilled Jade's automatic protest. Throughout her life, people had left. Parents through death, her sister through emotional withdrawal after her failed marriage, even friends who drifted away during her years of caregiving responsibilities. Yet here sat Elijah, unwavering in his vigil despite physical exhaustion and professional demands. "You should rest," she repeated, though with less insistence than before. "I'll rest when you're both home," Elijah replied, determination evident in his tone. "Dr. Reynolds is pleased with your progress. If everything continues improving, you could be discharged within a few days." "And Lily?" Jade asked, maternal concern overriding everything else. "She'll need to remain in the NICU for several weeks," Elijah explained carefully. "Her lungs are still developing, but she's responding well to treatment." "I need to see her," Jade insisted, attempting to sit up despite the surgical pain that immediately protested the movement. Elijah was beside her instantly, adjusting the bed to a more comfortable position. "As soon as you're cleared for wheelchair transport," he promised. "Possibly this afternoon if your vitals remain stable." A nurse entered with medication and a breakfast tray, efficiently checking Jade's surgical site and vital signs while chatting about the NICU staff's admiration for Dr. Blackwood's little girl. "He's been dividing time between your room and the nursery," the nurse confided when Elijah stepped out briefly to consult with the attending physician. "Reading medical journals aloud to your daughter when he's with her, reading poetry to you when he's here. Hasn't left the hospital since you were admitted." The revelation of these private vigils moved Jade deeply. She imagined Elijah maintaining his double watch, refusing to abandon either of them during their separate medical crises. When he returned, she studied him with new awareness of what these days had cost him. "You should rest," she said again, but with different meaning. "I should be here," he countered gently. "You are here," Jade replied, patting the edge of her hospital bed. "You can rest and be present simultaneously." After brief hesitation, Elijah carefully settled beside her on the narrow mattress, his tall frame awkwardly accommodated as his arms slipped carefully around her shoulders. The position couldn't possibly be comfortable, yet the tension gradually eased from his body as they lay in shared silence. "I keep seeing you on that operating table," he finally confessed, voice low against her hair. "Every time I close my eyes, I watch the monitor flatline again." The admission revealed what these days had truly cost him, not just physical exhaustion, but profound emotional trauma as both physician and partner. For perhaps the first time, Elijah had faced a medical crisis he couldn't control, couldn't solve through surgical skill or medical knowledge. "I'm still here," Jade assured him, fingers finding his where they rested against her shoulder. "I came back to you, to both of you." "You should rest," Elijah said, his own exhaustion evident in the slowing of his words. Jade smiled at his unconscious echo of her repeated concern. "I will if you will," she bargained softly. His answering murmur was unintelligible as the vigilance of days finally surrendered to exhaustion. Within moments, his breathing deepened into the rhythm of profound sleep, his body heavy against hers as defenses completely abandoned. Watching him finally succumb to rest, Jade reflected on their extraordinary journey. From strangers at a disrupted wedding to parents bound by crisis and deepening love, what had begun as madness had transformed into something neither could have anticipated or planned. "You should rest," a nurse whispered, entering to check vital signs but pausing at the sight of them together on the narrow bed. "We are," Jade answered simply, protective of Elijah's rare vulnerability. The nurse smiled understanding, completing her checks with minimal disturbance before quietly departing. Left alone in the softly lit room, Jade listened to the steady rhythm of Elijah's breathing, finding comfort in his solid presence beside her. Despite pain and uncertainty, despite the challenging recovery ahead for herself and their premature daughter, profound peace settled over her. Not the otherworldly tranquility of her near-death experience, but the quiet certainty of having found where she truly belonged. "You should rest," she whispered again to Elijah's sleeping form, the words becoming a promise rather than a suggestion. Surrounded by the antiseptic reality of the hospital room, monitors steadily tracking their shared survival, Jade finally allowed herself to acknowledge the truth that had been growing since that fateful day at St. Michael's Cathedral. Some interruptions weren't disruptions at all, but destiny asserting itself against the careful plans people made. As she drifted toward healing sleep, Elijah's heartbeat steady against her, Jade silently thanked whatever fate or chance had given her the courage to stand up in that cathedral months ago, setting in motion the unexpected journey that had led them here, to each other, to their daughter, to the family neither had imagined finding. Chapter 11. Unexpected Joy. 6 weeks after Lily's premature birth, Blackwood Haven resonated with the gentle lullabies Jade sang while rocking their daughter in the nursery Elijah had prepared during her hospital stay. "She's finally asleep," Jade whispered as Elijah appeared in the doorway. "How was her checkup today?" he asked, physician's concern momentarily overriding fatherly pride. "Dr. Reynolds says she's gaining weight right on schedule," Jade reported with relief. "Her lungs are strengthening, and the jaundice is completely resolved." Their peaceful moment was interrupted by Elijah's ringing phone. "That was Lawrence," he explained after ending the call. "Victoria's father has stepped down as hospital board chairman due to health concerns. Apparently, Roger Hamilton suffered a minor stroke last week. Victoria has returned to Charleston after her European holiday," Elijah continued. "Lawrence heard rumors she's been making statements about my family to influential social circles." "What kind of statements?" Jade asked. "Nothing specific yet, but Lawrence believes she's planning something vindictive. The Blackwood family has carefully guarded secrets, like most old Charleston dynasties." 3 weeks later, Jade stood in the crowded ballroom of Charleston's historic society, feeling out of place among the city's elite. The charity gala supporting children's hospital programs was their first public appearance since Lily's birth. "You look beautiful," Elijah murmured, his hand warm against the small of her back. Diana Winters approached, elegant in silver silk. "Victoria Hamilton just arrived with her parents," she warned. "Roger looks remarkably recovered from his stroke." As if summoned by their conversation, Victoria appeared across the room, resplendent in designer crimson. She navigated the crowd with practiced grace, stopping to speak with several prominent Charlestonians, while obviously tracking Elijah's location. "She's working the room quite deliberately," Diana observed. When Victoria finally approached, Elijah's hand found Jade's, their fingers intertwining in silent solidarity. "Elijah!" Victoria greeted with practiced warmth. "How lovely to see you looking so domestic. Fatherhood seems to agree with you, though perhaps not with your surgical schedule." "Family priorities," Elijah responded simply. Victoria's attention shifted to Jade, her expression calculating beneath social pleasantries. How fortunate that Elijah's family has been so accepting of your unique situation. We've been blessed with support from those who matter, Jade replied evenly. Though I wonder if that support might waver if certain family histories came to light, Victoria continued. Did you know your grandfather's commitment to mental health treatment stemmed from personal experience, Elijah? Or that your father's first marriage ended under such unusual circumstances? Before Elijah could respond, Jade stepped forward. Unlike you, Victoria, Elijah doesn't run from difficult truths, she said. Mental health challenges and complicated family histories aren't shameful secrets. They're part of what shaped him into the compassionate physician and father he's become. Victoria's perfect composure faltered slightly, clearly unprepared for direct confrontation. Unlike you, Jade continued, Elijah's past made him compassionate rather than vindictive. You lost a good man because you couldn't see beyond status to his heart. A ripple of murmured reactions spread through nearby guests. Victoria manufactured a tight smile before gliding away to join her parents across the room. That was unexpected, Diana remarked, genuine respect coloring her usually reserved tone toward Jade. Her habitat is cruelty disguised as social concern, Jade replied. I have little patience for it, especially when directed at my family. Elijah gazed at her with unconcealed admiration before his phone's distinct tone signaled a medical emergency. Trauma alert, he explained. Multi-vehicle accident on the highway. I need to get to the hospital. Go, Jade urged immediately. Lily and I will be fine. Later that night, after Margaret had returned to her apartment above the flower shop, Jade waited for Elijah's return in their bedroom. Near midnight, Elijah finally returned, the lingering intensity of emergency surgery evident in his expression. Difficult case? Jade asked softly. Teenage driver, he confirmed, exhaustion in every movement. Touch and go, but she'll recover with time and rehabilitation. I heard what you said to Victoria earlier about my family history making me compassionate rather than bitter. It's true, Jade replied simply. No one's ever defended me that way before, Elijah admitted. Throughout my life, the Blackwood name has been both protection and prison, opening doors while demanding perfect adherence to expectations. What did she mean about your father's first marriage? My father was briefly married before meeting my mother, Elijah explained, to a woman from outside the acceptable social circles. When she developed symptoms of bipolar disorder, he had the marriage annulled rather than supporting her treatment. That's horrible, Jade whispered. The official family history claims she left voluntarily, Elijah continued. But my mother told me the truth before she died. She made me promise never to abandon someone in need the way my father had done. Your mother would be proud of the man you've become, Jade said softly. My greatest fear, Elijah confessed, has always been becoming emotionally distant like my father, capable of discarding people when they become inconvenient. When Lily was born, that fear intensified. What if I don't know how to remain emotionally present? What if I fail her the way my father failed my mother? You won't, Jade assured him with certainty. Every day I watch you choose connection over distance. With patience, with Lily, and with me. Their conversation continued deep into the night, barriers falling as they shared fears and hopes without reservation. When dawn finally illuminated their room, something fundamental had shifted between them, trust solidified through honest recognition of both strengths and vulnerabilities. Chapter 12. Heart's Revelation. 14 months after Lily's birth, Jade stood in the sunroom studio, adding finishing touches to decorations for their daughter's birthday. Rising to reach another paintbrush, sudden dizziness swept over her. Strong arms caught her before she hit the floor, Elijah's voice calling her name as consciousness wavered. At Charleston Memorial, tests revealed news that stunned them both into silence. Congratulations, Doctor, Chen announced, turning the ultrasound monitor. "You're approximately 12 weeks pregnant with twins." "That's impossible," Jade whispered. After Lily's traumatic birth, Dr. Reynolds had warned another pregnancy was extremely unlikely. "Both with strong heartbeats," Dr. Chen confirmed, pointing to the screen. Elijah leaned forward, medical training allowing him to interpret the sonogram. "Identical," he said softly, wonder replacing shock in his voice. At 32 weeks, despite all precautions, premature labor began. Jade found herself in Charleston Memorial's surgical suite, monitors tracking 3 separate heartbeats. "Blood pressure dropping," a nurse announced with concern. Through medication-induced haziness, Jade registered Elijah's voice from across the room in surgical scrubs. After much discussion, he had honored hospital protocol rather than remaining by her side during delivery. "First twin delivered," Dr. Reynolds announced. "Apgar 7. Relief momentarily balanced Jade's growing weakness before awareness slipped away, monitors beeping urgently as her blood pressure fell. "She's hemorrhaging," a voice noted. "Type and cross for 4 units." The last sensation Jade registered was Elijah's voice, urgent with controlled fear. "Stay with us, Jade. Fight." Then darkness claimed her completely. For 7 days, Elijah divided himself between 3 hospital rooms, the NICU, where his twin son steadily improved, and the ICU, where Jade remained in a medically induced coma. He slept in uncomfortable chairs, reading medical journals to his sons and poetry to Jade. Margaret brought Lily for brief visits to meet her brothers. At 2, she seemed to grasp that her mother was very sleepy and her brothers too little to play yet. On the 8th day, as Elijah dozed beside Jade's bed, her fingers twitched within his grasp. Her eyelids fluttered open, questions evident despite the ventilator preventing speech. "Our sons," he answered her unspoken question. "They're fighters, just like their mother. 5 pounds each now and breathing without assistance." "Mason and Noah," Elijah supplied, "both with your chin and my unfortunate Blackwood eyebrows." Her fingers traced against his palm. Lily. "Lily is perfect," he assured her. "She's appointed herself their official protector." Relief softened Jade's expression before exhaustion reclaimed her. 3 years later, Blackwood Haven echoed with children's laughter as guests gathered to celebrate Lily's 4th birthday. The once formal estate had transformed into a vibrant family home. "Careful, Mason," Lily instructed, guiding her brother across the grass. "Noah, stay with us." At 3, the twins remained nearly identical, distinguished by Mason's adventurous nature and Noah's thoughtful observation. James Blackwood arrived, helped from his car by his driver. Since his stroke, the elder Blackwood had mellowed considerably, his rigid demeanor softened by his grandchildren's affection. "Grandpa!" Lily abandoned her brothers to race across the lawn, launching herself at James with complete confidence. As evening approached, Jade found a quiet moment alone near the garden roses. Elijah joined her with 2 champagne glasses. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box containing an emerald ring similar to the color of the dress she'd worn to interrupt his wedding. "This was my grandmother's," he explained. "She left it for the woman brave enough to help Elijah find his authentic path." "We've done everything backwards," Elijah continued, taking her hand. "We have 3 magnificent children and a partnership built on hard-earned trust. I'm asking because after all this time, I still find myself continually falling in love with you in new ways." "When I walked into that church," Jade murmured, "I thought I was saving you from a mistake." "You weren't saving me from a mistake," Elijah replied, drawing her into his arms. "You were leading me home." As sunset bathed their family in golden light, Elijah kissed her with the same passion that had first ignited between them, now deepened by their journey from strangers to soulmates. "Mama! Daddy!" Lily called from the porch. "Noah's eating flowers again." Laughing, Jade slipped the emerald ring onto her finger before they hurried toward their children. Whatever the future held, they would face it together, in the love neither had sought but both had chosen to embrace.